Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another video of Learn with Laraib. Today we will be discussing the limbic system. Now, what is limbic system? It's a collection of neuronal structures which are present in our brain, specifically near the temporal region. So it is involved in the emotion, olfaction, long-term memory, behavior modulation, and control of ANS. Now, we also know that both the emotion and olfaction are also related with the temporal lobe. And whenever you associate any kind of fragrance with memory, it is through the limbic system. The limbic system consists of hippocampus, amygdala, cingulate gyrus, hypothalamus, and mammillary body, septal nuclei, and olfactory bulb and cortex. These four are high yield and important for your exam. Starting with hippocampus, it is located in the medial temporal lobe and is basically associated with the memory as well as the spatial navigation. So the lesion in hippocampus will lead to memory loss, and this will be anterograde amnesia. And this is that the person will, in simple words, have short-term memory loss. Whenever you get a MCQ or a scenario mentioning that a person had a recent trauma, is able to remember his old memories, let's say from the school or the past, but is not able to remember what happened yesterday, then the person is suffering from anterograde amnesia and the lesion might be in the hippocampus. Now, coming to amygdala, it is present anterior to the hippocampus, again in the temporal lobe, and is responsible for fear, aggression, and emotional learning. It is associated with serotonin in this aspect. The lesion of amygdala will result in kluver syndrome. Now, what is kluver syndrome? In kluver syndrome, the person will experience hypersexuality as well as there will be no fear and oral fixation. So hypersexuality is the key word, and whenever there is no fear with hypersexuality and a scenario comes, you can relate it with the lesion in amygdala, and that will be due to Kluver-Bucy syndrome. Coming to the cingulate gyrus, it is present not in the temporal lobe but at the medial surface of cerebral cortex, sorry. Also, the location is not very important. It is present above corpus callosum. It's not very high yield for the exam. It's just for your understanding. The cingulate gyrus is associated with emotion mainly, and that is the motor expression of motion, which is so differentiate between an emotion, a feeling, which is fear and aggression, and a motor expression of emotion, which is crying or laughing or smiling. So amygdala was responsible for the feeling. This is for the motor response. And lesion in cingulate gyrus will result in emotional dullness or apathy. So the person will not be able to emphasize, or for example, the person will not be able to cry and there will be emotional dullness. Now, the hypothalamus and mammillary body, we have done hypothalamus in detail already, and it is associated with control of ANS basically. And mammillary body is again associated with memory and is an important part of Papez circuit, which we will be doing next. Damage or lesion of mammillary body can lead to memory loss or confabulation. This is also known as Korsakoff's disease and is heightened by Wernicke's-Korsakoff disease when the person drinks in alcohol and there is low thiamine. We will discuss this in later videos. Septal nuclei and olfactory bulb cortex. The septal nuclei is basically responsible for reward and pleasure and is associated with dopamine hormone over here. We will talk about it in dopaminergic pathways. And olfactory bulb and cortex is associated with the smell. So smell and memory, when they're linked, they are through the limbic system. Now, moving on to the Papez circuit, this is basically the memory and emotion pathway. Now, no one will ask you directly about the Papez circuit, but I believe that understanding what happens in here will help you learn the function and solve the MCQs then. So there's a mnemonic, hippo must always cry, poor hippo. So this is how it goes. The pathway is from hippocampus, mammillary bodies, M for must, M for mammillary bodies. Always take the A for anterior thalamus. Now, if you remember my video on thalamus, we mentioned this pathway there as well. I did not name it, but with the anterior nuclei of the thalamus, this was present the limbic system, cingulate, gyrus, and stuff. C for cry, C for cingulate gyrus, P for poor, P for parahippocampal gyrus, and H for hippocampus. So I know this is not exactly tested on exam, but you can remember the mnemonic and it will help you. So there's a loop which connects the hippocampus, hypothalamus, thalamus, and cortex. So this is that loop. This is the part of cortex. And this loop is known as Papez Circuit, which is responsible for linking the emotion with memory, as well as converting your short-term memory into long-term memory and emotional significance of that memory. All right, so this was all about the Papez circuit. We will now be discussing the dopaminergic pathways. So there are four main dopaminergic pathways. We have mesolimbic, mesocortical, nigrostriatal, and tuberoinfundibular. So these are the pathways in which dopamine is acting as a neurotransmitter, and these pathways are commonly altered by the drugs, for example, antipsychotics or movement disorders. Anything involving dopamine will be affecting these pathways. Now, what is the mesolimbic pathway? As we just did the limbic system, and we will be doing midbrain in our next video. Mesolimbic pathway is the pathway which connects the ventral tegmental area of midbrain with the limbic system and is responsible for reward and reinforcement. So, the clinical importance is that increased activity of the mesolimbic pathway will result in positive symptoms such as hallucination or delusions. And this is the main target for schizophrenic drugs. So, schizophrenic drugs act at the mesolimbic dopaminergic pathways to decrease the hallucination and delusions. The mesocortical pathway, the meso part comes from again the ventral tegmental area of the midbrain connected with the cortex, and this is basically associated with the cognition, planning, motivation, and emotional tone of it. So, cortex, the function of cortex, related to the emotional tone or the planning and motivation. It's basically associated with the prefrontal cortex, which is again known for planning and motivation. The clinical importance is that decrease in dopamine will result in negative symptoms of schizophrenia, which are apathy, flat effect, or poor focus. Person will have less energy, there will be a lack of spontaneity, and antipsychotic drugs here have a limited effect and might even worsen it. So the nigrostriatal pathway, we did this in the basal ganglia. So this involves the dopamine and this is the major dopaminergic pathway in brain and significantly affected by the movement disorders and antipsychotic drugs. So decrease in activity of nigrostriatal pathway will result in extrapyramidal symptoms which are like the Parkinson. So Parkinsonism, dystonia, akathisia, tardive dyskinesia, all of these are result in low dopamine release from nigrostriatal pathway. This is the one which is involved in the Parkinson's disease and extrapyramidal symptoms. Whenever you come across this word, it is associated with nigrostriatal pathway or dopamine. Tuberoinfundibular pathway, we did this in hypothalamus, in which the dopamine controls the prolactin release. And if there is increased activity of dopamine, there will be increased activity of prolactin, resulting in decreased libido and sexual dysfunction. The main important point is that it will result in galactoria and gynecomastia, which is a side effect of some antipsychotic drugs as well. So this is all for dopaminergic pathway. Again, this is not very directly tested in exam. However, the concept is tested in exam. So you should know this so you will be able to solve the MCQs, especially from pharma. So this was all for today's video. Please subscribe to my channel and don't forget to share the video. Thank you.